Welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon and I'm the host of a Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, techniques, tips, strategies to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. First, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present and ongoing connection to the lands and cultural beliefs. Welcome newcomers to the Facebook group and podcasts. We love hearing the diverse reasons why teachers across the world are joining. So much deep and creative literacy work going on in schools. Some recent comments from those who've joined. A teacher really looking for professional literacy learning and resources. Hope we've got that in spades for you. Being alerted to new ideas regarding literacy. Another teacher, I'm always looking for innovative ways to help students learn to read and love reading. To expand my knowledge about your practices. And from a school leader, I'd like to access professional learning from experts to help guide our literacy curriculum. So if you're not a member of the Teacher's Toolkit Facebook group, we'd love you to join and introduce yourself to the group. But welcome to this podcast episode today called Teachers Sharing Their Professional Practices, Part 1. And welcome to Kate, Ra and Robert from Mount Barker South Primary School. So we've got a full studio here today. Welcome to, I'm going to go around, Robert's right next to me, and I'm going to get each of them to tell you a little bit about themselves and their context at Mount Barker South Primary. Robert, would you like to kick off?
Yeah, sure. My name's Robert Kennedy. I'm teaching in a combined class with two teachers in an open space classroom, sharing the job with a wonderful partner. And we share the jobs teaching the children. So my job for the last 2 terms has been leading the literacy. I've been teaching. Term 3 was fantasy and this term is realistic fiction. So, yeah. Yes.
Fantastic. And new to Mount Barker South in term 3.
Yeah,
so,
that's
yes.
right. I came in halfway through the year.
Yes.
And I'm loving it. So there's wonderful supportive staff there and it's a great place to work.
Yeah. And year 4-5.
Year 4-5, yes.
Year 4-5. Okay, on to Ra.
Yep. So my name is Ra Teachific and I teach at Mount Barker South in the year 5-6 unit. I team teach with Kate, who's right next to me. We've team taught for a couple of years now. We both have facilitator roles, so I'm the numeracy facilitator at our site, and Kate will explain what she is. And we've been on this journey of changing our literacy curriculum, very much aligning with reading and writing workshops and, getting our students to change the way they think about their reading and writing and themselves as readers and writers, which has been really exciting as well.
Yeah. Fantastic. And over to you, Kate.
So I'm Kate Tucker. I've been at Mount Barker South for 9 years now. As Ra said, we team teach together, so we've got our own classrooms, but we come together for a lot of our literacy stuff, especially our mini lessons, and then divide out into our classes. But it's been really great working with somebody else that's also passionate for the change in literacy, which has been great. And then this year I was lucky to be given the role of the literacy facilitator for the site. So I've been working across with all the staff and students from R to 6. So I've really enjoyed that as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And it has been an absolute privilege for me to be part of the Mount Barker South team on a fortnightly basis, getting to work with you all there. So really important for us to have you here as part of sharing professional practice, because that's something that has become a really strong focus for the work that you are doing this year and the sharing of it. So the collaboration that you're doing in teams, to really drive your own learning as well as your students' learning. Part of the work at Mount Barker South was developing some integrated units of work. So you've already mentioned, Robert, about that integration of the reading and the writing work, and in particular using mentor texts and literature as a real driver for the teaching and learning. So the reasons for the topic today, we talk about, well, what's the teaching struggle? Well, as teachers, we're looking for those really meaningful ways to engage students in their learning. Because students can easily disengage when learning experiences are one-off or they're not connected and they don't see the reasons for those things to be connected. And we're looking for ways to more easily cover a number of skills, strategies in the curriculum through that integrated approach to teaching reading and writing. So I'm going to stop the talking here for a moment, because as soon as I open up this question to the three, I don't know who's going to be the first one out of the, what do you call it when horses race? Out of the
bolt.
Out of the gate. Right, out of the gate. So first up, really this idea of developing units of work and working as reading, writing, connected piece was a new way to begin working this year in that integrated way. So I want you to talk a bit about what you've learned about developing those units and what's working with that. What are the noticings you've had about doing that? So Ra's nodding a lot.
Well,
You're ready to go.
I am
Brilliant.
ready to go. I know at the beginning of the year when Kate and I were planning out our whole year overview, and we were looking at our first initial units, we're building that community of readers and writers. We sort of were trying a few things and trying to work out how to get our reading and writing to connect. I think we struggled with that initially, like we were having them quite separate workshops. So we worked really hard in term 2 to work out how we could integrate them more so that they did follow along, whichever was coming first, the reading workshop or the writing workshop. And then that took a lot of discussions between us and reflecting on what is working, what is not working, what feels like a natural flow, what can we change. And I do think that over term 2 and 3 particularly, Kate, we sort of worked really hard on that ourselves, and then we got that came out with the students as well. They could see a much stronger connection between what we were reading and what we were asking them to have a go at writing.
I think just to add on that is we also were really strategic in the mentor text that we use to support us. So we learnt a lot in that term 1 that mentor text is so vital to make sure that we've got the connection between the reading and writing, but also taking it from what we're noticing with the students, that if they aren't, we're trying to get them to write in a certain way or, understand a comprehension strategy, we need that mentor text to help guide that as well. So I think we really shifted our thinking in that aspect as well.
Yeah. Are there particular, I know how hard you did work around that, and in that first term, can you kind of remember why you felt it wasn't integrated in the first term? Like where was the scratchy point?
Yeah, I think part of it wasn't a great start to the year either, because the first 2 weeks, we were still affected by COVID.
Yes.
Kate was on site.
Yeah.
I was unfortunately in lockdown at home, and as were a number of our students. So we didn't get that initial first blast all together. And not trying to make an excuse of that, but it did we did have to sort of start building our culture of our classrooms.
And our topic was persuasive speeches as well. So we kind of felt that maybe wasn't the ideal one to start them off, seeing as we were learning as well. We did find that trying to mould those two together, we probably needed some experience ourselves to be able to do that, whereas a lot of the other topics like narrative have lent itself really easily.
Yeah.
So we did struggle a little bit with that.
Did.
But such good reflection, isn't it? To think why, it wasn't, okay, hands in the air, it's not working, this isn't going to work. But it was all about, on reflection, and I love that, and this is a big thing that we talk about, at Mount Barker South all the time. Listen to me, but, it's that noticing, isn't it? What what are we noticing our students connecting with, or struggling with, or not making the connections with, that really started driving? I remember those early conversations about how do we make this work, but it was because of your noticings and because of the reflection that really drove you to, okay, let's adjust this, let's try this. And really by term 2, you were kicking off, really strongly with all of that reflection that you'd taken on. And Robert, you stepped in, of course, in term 3 with really planning already underway. And so how do you feel that you slotted in?
Well, I suppose, as speaking from experience, it's always been a struggle to find those decent mentor texts which are really engaging for the students. And just, I suppose, listening to your podcasts made me reflect on my own teaching, and I thought this is how it should be done, where you have a really good mentor text that you use for everything, which then leads into your writing, and you continuously go back to that mentor text to talk about the specific features that you're wanting the children to pick up on in their writing. And it may be looking at the dialogue, so you share with them the dialogue and the mentor text that you're reading to them on a daily basis. You're showing them where the paragraph breaks are. So, and also if you have that mentor text, which is really tantalising, like draws the children in, then that's going to obviously help with their writing process as well. Yeah. For me, it just made sense, and I couldn't understand why I couldn't have thought of this before. Because obviously when you're teaching without that mentor text, you're jumping all over the show with these different types of stories that, you might show them a page of this story and show them a page of that story, and then there's no connection. So it just made sense to use the one text, which is really engaging for me. And
to actually, there's 2 thoughts that I want to hold on to here. One is, of course, that the mentor text, because it's so strong, absolutely allows your students then to be noticing the same things in their own texts. And so that's another thing I know in your class, Robert, that you've worked really hard at, is getting students doing that noticing as they're reading.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Having that focus for each lesson and revisiting those focuses as well, so they build those strategies and so they can carry it into their writing themselves, and noticing these things in their own reading. One particular student of mine said to me, Mr. Kennedy, I hate that you've changed me into a person who looks at my reading as a writer now, because I just want to enjoy the text without looking at all these specific language features and stuff. And I said, Mila, I'm so happy that's happened for you, because, obviously it's working for your writing. Her writing is so strong now. It's just amazing to read her own writing.
And must enhance her reading too.
Yeah, that's right. She's still reading a lot of dragon stories, but...
Yeah. And I am just going to loop back to one thing that you said earlier too, is that you came to Mount Barker South via the podcast, really, because Robert mentioned that that he'd heard things in the podcast. So I did just want to make the connection about how your own professional learning in another country. So you were in New Zealand listening to the podcast.
Yeah, I'd made a note of them somehow. I just wrote, I saved on your podcast, but I hadn't actually listened to it. It's probably a year later that I started listening to them, because I travelled to Australia at the start of the year, but obviously there's so much paperwork to get through before you can become a teacher in this country. So I had a lot of time on my hands, so I was listening to your podcasts on a daily basis because I want some professional development. I want to keep myself in tune with what's happening over here in Australia. And then I found out you actually live in Australia, in Adelaide, sorry. You actually live here in Adelaide. And I went, oh, wow, maybe I'll be able to find some schools that has your literacy program running through them. And there was a number. I was in Handoff, and I noticed some of the things there that you were doing with Handoff. I'm not too sure if you've got a link there, but they're definitely using some of your stuff there. And then I was lucky enough to be working at Mount Barker, filling in for Whare, as a TRT, and I just noticed some of the things that was happening in the classroom. I thought, I just made a connection there to your podcast. And as Ra said, early on, I asked her the question, is Sharon involved with you here? And yeah, I was quite delighted to find out that you were. So yeah, I love the literacy program that's running at Mount Barker School, and there's all these plus things that keep you on a school. Obviously, the staff who support you and the programs that they run, and I feel that the programs that Mount Barker has are fantastic. The literacy and the numeracy are really strong.
And to be able to step into a school and really be drawn into a very collaborative approach to the planning, to be able to be part of a team. And I think that's the strong thing that Ra and Kate mentioned in their introductions is this collaborative planning. And actually, I feel you plan together as a team. No. Do you plan?
Well, there is a link,
Do you plan?
Kate and I plan together.
Yeah.
You're kind of like, the one team there.
Yep.
But you've got 4 teams, I think.
Yes.
You've got like a R1, a 2, 3,
A 4-5.
4, 5, and then a 5,
6.
6. Yeah.
I do think I'm going to do a little plug here for Kate and you, Sharon, that the work you two have done to facilitate everybody across our site being able to jump on board and feel really supported to change their practice and look at their practice carefully of the reading and writing workshops and develop it and, have those stronger outcomes for students. The scaffold you two have given us has really helped everybody. And I think there is a total buy-in across our site. And without that, it wouldn't work as strongly as it is.
Yeah.
It needs the staff to go, yes, we all agree with this, we all believe in this too, and we all commit to it. So I think that's been a strength for us this year.
And I want to back that up too, in that commitment to having in the school a literacy and a numeracy facilitator who can help bring those things to life and to have that ongoing, it's hard without somebody being there driving
And then I
the
think
learning
the way that
around
Cassie
that.
set up our
And
action
Cassie, the
teams
principal.
also,
Oh, yes.
is really beneficial for the team. So how it works is that we've got obviously myself and Ra as the literacy and numeracy facilitator, and then below that, side by side in a way, that we've got the action team. So each teaching group of R1, 2, 3, 4, 5, each teacher is designated to either literacy or numeracy, and then they're the one that's responsible for them feeding it back to their own year level team. So then it's making them accountable as the leader of that group to make sure that message is getting passed on, that we're trying to all have that buy-in that Ra was talking about as well.
Yeah. These systems that are in place really enable people to be along with it and to not just feel that it's being something dropped on everyone, but to actively engage with it and really be leading their own learning in a sense.
And I think Cassie set that up really well, that our principal, in the way that she has allowed us to be the leaders of it as well. She's not the one driving it. She's there side by side with us, but she's put full trust and into us as educators and leaders of our teams that we want to make that change and we're happy to implement it. And I think she's been really supportive in that way and allowed, teachers to be spending, taking out for the day and spending time with Sharon, or whether it's Sharon coming in and side by side or whatever practice it is. I think she's been really supportive of that, which has definitely helped.
Yeah.
Non-threatening as well. When you're coming in, Sharon, it's not a threatening situation. The teachers know you're there to help us and, point out little things, which really does make a difference to our practice. It's been very helpful.
Yeah, I think also the allowing, Kate's and has designed a model where we all got to have a go in the first part of the year, and then we were supported with that, and then we got a little bit of extra mentoring from you, Sharon, when you came in, and then we got to meet with you and discuss that. I think just that whole model has supported everybody along the way, that that ties into that non-threatening thing, Robert, that, we all buy in, we believe in it, because how could we not? The passion that you bring has definitely come across to us, but then it makes it easier. because we want to have that change for our students.
Yeah. And I think that's the part that I'd love to talk a bit more about too, is this, that's really fed into this whole notion of noticing. This year has been a really big thing, this constant, in response to what you're doing, the noticing, and that's become a big, and that's really, that's also a non-threatening way of being as a teacher too, isn't it? When you're doing something new, to notice, okay, how's that worked? How do our students respond? Could you just talk to me maybe a little bit about, I love that we've had from Robert, we need some little stories, the noticing of, the one child going, oh, you've turned me into a reader who reads like a writer. But what are some of the noticings that you feel you've been able to, what's the word I'm looking for, that you've maybe been able to be aware of this year that you might not have taken into account before? Would you say there are new noticings, or?
I can say first, and then mine would probably be around. So it's a bit of backstory first, is that we obviously meet as teams weekly, so we have to have scheduled time in for that. And I think prior to that, we got really caught up in trying to plan a 5-week unit, trying to plan the term. Whereas now that we have these weekly meetings, we are planning weekly, and everything that we talk about at our meeting is what we've noticed from the prior week. So if we have been doing paragraph structures and we've gone in and we assume, they know how to do this, they know the strategies, they know what to put in there. But then once we actually teach, we can then reflect on that week. So Ra and I meet on a Tuesday and we talk about I can see 10 kids that don't get that, right? So that's our noticing that we need to do. So I think not necessarily one little thing, but I think as teachers we have really been able to notice the students as a whole by having that weekly catch-up and adjustment to our planning. I think it's been really beneficial.
Mm. I'll just connect that idea of that there has been big investment made. You've all made, the school's made a time investment, and you've made those time investments too in that planning. And that's bigger this year than previous years, or that you've experienced.
It's more that deliberate planning. I think we've always done the planning, but making it more deliberate and purposeful, I think, is the big shift this year.
And shared. The fact that because we team teach, that does support us saying to each other, if you've missed something, somebody might be leading the lesson that day, the other person will notice other things that are going on.
Yes.
And that's really helped us, I think.
Actually, that's an important piece that happens in both of your settings, is really what you're being in your planning is responsive. The noticings are enabling you to be more responsive to what does this group of students need, or how much more of this do we need, or do we cut back on this part? But even in that responsiveness is, I'd say, in the roving conferences that you're doing, or the roving of the room, they are the things where lots of noticing is going on that leads into, and feeds into that planning as well. But I think even some on-the-spot things means
I know. Remember, Kate, when you were doing some word work and it came up about the colons and when to use a colon, and all the kids looked at us and said, "I guess we'll be doing that in the writing workshop later in the week." It was like, "Yes, you will," which was really nice, wasn't it? Nice. That direct came out of what they were doing and experimenting with, and a question a student had, and then we went, "Yep, okay, we need to address this. This needs to be one of our mini lessons." So.
Same thing happened in our room with dialogues, writing dialogue and the layout of that, and it was writing the dialogue all over the place, and so we sat down as a class and focused on the mental text, and then that carried through into our mini writing session to help them with that structure.
Yeah. Yes, and what it's doing, I'll make a link to the Australian curriculum here, is in the new in the version 9 of the Australian curriculum, it's even more intentional that it's talking about teaching our students to use mentor texts to support them as writers. And so this intentionality that you were talking about right here is that very thing that the way we read absolutely informs not only our writing, but all our understanding. How does a colon work? So that influences how we read text and understand it. So, these are older children, but that they are clearly making those connections across those things and seeing the connectedness of reading and writing are in service to each other. It isn't, right, we do this here, okay, something completely different over there. So, okay. All right, and so just one little share too about, so the units of work, you really run a unit of work 2 across a term.
Yes. Yeah, roughly 5 weeks,
Yeah. How do you find that for pacing?
I think last term worked really well. We had 2, we were doing an author study. We did Chris Van Allsburg and review writing. So I think, Chris Van Allsburg went for 5 weeks and that was the right amount of time because a whole term on one author would have been too much. Yeah. So 5 weeks means it's intense. We got through 5 mentor texts as well from him, and that was enough, to introduce to the students. And if they want to read any more of his texts, they can. That's fine. And then
because then we also connected the review with Chris Van Allsburg because we did our review. We allowed them to choose between a movie or a book review, and we did Jumanji. So then so it's still, the author was still carrying on, but we moved on to the style of review writing rather than looking deeper into the author.
Yeah.
So those 2 fit really nicely last year, didn't they?
Yeah.
We did that well, right?
Yeah. All very intentional. But let's get back to the planning. That's exactly what you do, in thinking, all right, we want to do the review writing, so does that mean we start something entirely new again, or do we build on?
And I think that's what we thought was we're not going to get enough time to teach them the reading, writing strategies of review writing if we're then going to read a whole new book, go and watch a whole new movie. Yeah. But we'd show something that the whole class had access to and were connected to.
Yes, yeah. And they're important planning decisions. Yeah. That's what makes otherwise we hear ourselves saying, how do we fit all this in? How do we expose students to as much, to as many types of writing as we can? Because the Australian curriculum is pretty rich in the range of writing that we want students to be experiencing both as readers and as writers.
I think that Chris Van Allsburg as well was being very intentional about which mentor text we used each week. So that we left Jumanji right to the end so that, we had the buy-in then as well. And we watched the movie as a bit of a celebration of, the end of that unit, moving us straight into the next unit of review writing. Yeah. So it's really picking your way through, okay, I want to use this text for these purposes and this text for this purpose. And, I think that.
Knowing your mentor text, I think is really crucial.
Yeah. I'm going to segue into the mentor text piece right now because that was a big piece for this year, because coming into this year, it's a whole new way of working and planning as a school, and mentor texts, well, Kate, the mentor texts weren't ready, were they?
No, they were not.
No. And so, that sounded a bit targeted. It wasn't. But I'm just saying, so this is a good thing to talk about here, because we've already talked a little bit about how how to make or how to introduce a new something into a school takes a lot of coordination and systems in place. And Kate has become the queen of mentor text ordering this year, because you have really, term by term, looked at and taken as part of your role, you have really upskilled yourself in looking for mentor texts, what to look for, where to find those, how to get good recommendations. And I'm saying too much. Over to you, Kate. Talk a little bit about, because it's been a big process. And I know the other day you said, I feel like I've spent all year just doing mentor texts. But hasn't it been amazing? Like, Ra, you would absolutely concur that the ordering of and selecting so that texts are there ready for people. And then I'll get you to talk a little bit about this year's process, and then we'll talk about next year's. Yeah.
So I think when I took over the role, big thing that I spoke to Sharon was the fact that we need those mentor texts to help guide the teachers. And I think for me, I was, as a facilitator, I was trying to get them to buy into the new process of reading, writing workshop. And I just thought by then adding the element of now go and source your mentor text, I just felt like that was something that I could remove, that they didn't need to think about, and that I could support them in a way from a distance. So I went out, we spoke about what we got our learning map, and we worked out what genres we're going to do, and then I went out and sourced the mentor text for the teams. So there was a range of ways that I did that. Obviously, I used the curriculum document. There was already a couple of suggestion texts there to use, but I then contacted a few different book companies to get some ideas. Booktopia were fantastic. They were really supportive of me. When I gave them like a genre, they'd give a few ideas, especially like with persuasive and things. But from there, I just basically spent time literally Googling good persuasive text for 5 to 6 year olds, and it would just come up with a massive list. So then I just spent time reading reviews, analysing what the book is. But for me, I just have learned so much about text. And I think one thing I said to Sharon, like she just said before, was I reflected back and I thought, I have learned so much, and I feel like my whole year, I just feel like that's all I've done for people, and I feel like I've probably let down in other areas. But then I said to Sharon, but I think next year I need to give them the opportunity to help with these mentor texts, because what I've learned with these texts, they need the opportunity to do that next year. So we are sitting down with our action team next week, and each team's going to help select the books for next year. So the aim is that we go on a 2-year cycle at our school, so that the texts we've got for this year will come back out in 2 years' time. So they get put away in the library, and then we like to keep them as new and exciting texts for the students, and not so much something that they read on a day-to-day basis. So trying to find variety, I think, was also the other thing I looked at.
Yeah. A variety and availability, because, of course, Googling text, best, say, persuasive text, sometimes we can find a lot of texts published elsewhere, and not always lists that are local. So you've done an amazing job of sourcing a lot of things that have been local, as well as we're not discounting international, but in our curriculum too, the range of texts that students are,
and particularly at the start of the year with the COVID and stuff, the freight times and stuff, like trying to get around that. So that really became important, that I needed to get books that were in stock too. So trying to find those was a little bit tricky, but it's definitely got easier the more the year's gone on.
Yes, yeah.
You've also provided options in the mentor text. So with each unit, it's not just one mentor text for teachers to look at. There's options. So if you're not familiar with one, there might be one in there that you're already familiar with. But we should be becoming familiar with whatever's on offer as well.
Yeah, and that's a big point. I think, Kate, that your learnings and what you've found was absolutely so supportive for teachers of, like you say, Ra, that some options were given, and then that gave you choice and gave you opportunity to not just be given a text and say, okay, this is the one you're using, but okay, here's what we've got. Now you as teacher can make some choices about what you're going to use, or maybe you're going to use more than one of those. So now, how have you stored those, Dave?
So after the unit has finished, so we got a mentor text pack that will go to the teams. So, for example, Robert and his peer teacher would have a pack of text that they would keep for the 5-week unit. Then they're going to be stored in our library in our teacher resource area. So they'll be all stored in an individual tub. And then when that unit comes around in, another 2 years' time, they can literally pull out the tub and they're those mentor texts. And our aim is that we're not looking at deleting the text, because obviously different teachers will find different things, like Ra was saying, and then hopefully we can just add a couple each year, and then we're just building up that bank and sustaining it, and it's there to support the teachers straight away.
Yeah. And we'll also acknowledge there's been the principal, Cassie, has also
allowed my budget to flow this year, which has been great.
Yes.
I just keep going back. She's like, yeah, that's fine. Find a bit more. A bit more.
I know. I love it. Every time I come, it's like, oh, guess what I've just bought? Guess what I found? So, yes. And to have teams as part of that process next year, our knowledge, building teachers' knowledge of tantalising texts, of good texts that are out there.
And I think, like I said, I think they're ready for that now.
Yeah.
Whereas I felt, and it wasn't because they weren't capable, I just felt like their need was in shifting their mindset to doing the reading and writing, and this is my way that I could support them. Whereas this year we've, had their 12 months to have a go at it, and now their next step is, right, what mentor text support that?
Yes.
So that's building up the learning. And then also on that, obviously Cassie's been great in supporting getting teacher mentor texts as well, so our teacher reference texts, and having them available to teams and individuals has also then lended itself to support those mentor texts as well, which has been great.
Yeah. Now, Robert, your fantasy unit, you brought the mentor text to that unit, didn't you?
Yeah, I always, when I'm thinking about what I'm going to teach, I always try and select something which will work for me as a teacher as well. And if I know the text familiar and I know that the text will be tantalising and it will actually help the children when I bring it in myself. So I went through a number of books for the realistic fiction. I went through Michael and Paul. I thought, I could do this. But then I found out that Ra teaches that book.
Well, I haven't yet.
Kanzuki's Island. I was going to get the children to write about being lost on an island, which would be inspirational reading that book. So, and then I thought of some other books. There's a polar bear one, so they could write about the theme of global warming. But then I thought of Hatchet, which I read to my kids quite a few years ago, and I thought, well, this would be a great mentor text, because the children could then write their own stories about being trapped in the wilderness. And then we brainstormed around that sort of idea of how would we be lost in the wilderness, that what would be the cause, there'd have to be an accident of some sort. So we went through all the planning process based on the mentor text that I had in mind. And so as we've been going through Hatchet, all these sorts of ideas which are leading into our writing are starting to crop up. All these little problems that would happen to you if you're stuck in the wilderness alone with nothing but a hatchet. So, having that mentor text, which is, a great resource, which you can pull lessons from, is really vital.
Yes. And you're really talking strongly there about that, getting ideas and organise, that it's that you're talking about pre-planning.
That's right. You've got to make it easy for yourself.
You can really, as we listen to this text, it's, we're wondering, okay, how do we get the idea? What is the idea that we can come up with? So I think sometimes, we can think about mentor texts about, the crafts or the conventions or the I'm just thinking about 6+ traits, conventions or grammar, or sentence fluency. But this whole idea of using the mentor text to also generate and drive thinking about planning and crafting ideas, with that pre-planning that we do with those texts really lets us open the doors for our listeners to do that thinking.
That's right.
As writer.
I read to my daughter on a regular basis at night, and I'm reading to her novels now. She's progressed into listening to novels, and I'm reading the stories as a writer. And one of the books that I came across was The One and Only Ivan by Christine Applegate, I think that's her name. So I researched her, and then I found out that she did have a fantasy story in line as well. So that's where the Endling came from. And she's just a wonderful writer. She uses all the things that you would want to teach in a lesson, personification and just all these fabulous vocabulary. The story probably sits a little bit above the children as well as far as their understanding for vocabulary, but it's that stretch for them that really helps with their vocabulary as well, which I think's a vital thing to do.
Yes, yeah. And it feeds back to that lovely Frank Smith quote about we can only write as well as the literature we're surrounded by. So if it's above,
they'll rise to it.
They absolutely do.
Well, I just think the program is just really a really good program for beginning teachers because it gives them a strong structure, and it takes away that worry of groupings that I think previously a lot of teachers have been focused on. You don't have to have groupings with this particular literacy program. The children choose their own books which suits them at their own level. They can stretch themselves, and you try and influence them into stretching themselves, and it takes away that I'm in this group sort of attitude. I'm not the strongest reader in the classroom because I'm grouped with all these other readers that are not that strong. So that's sort of, I think the program takes away that from the classroom. And from what I've seen, the school at Mount Barker South is so strong in their reading. All the kids are very strong readers. It's just amazing. You just look at them and they're just so engaged in their reading. It's just unbelievable. And this is how a literacy program should be.
We've had to work on that though, Robert. I have to say it wasn't always like that.
Yeah.
And us moving to reading and writing workshops and making sure there is the time in the day for the students to actually read has been a big change for us. Wouldn't you agree, Kate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So right there, isn't that just an interesting noticing from Robert, new in halfway through the year, because that was a piece prior to this year that you were aware of, that you didn't necessarily have your students engaging in reading in a strong or positive way necessarily.
That's what I noticed at first up in SLC, in the senior part of the school, and then obviously me moving to the middle primary part of the school. It was there, but it wasn't as strong as it should have been. So you coming in and saying, why don't you try this with the kids, and then getting them to focus on their reading for that good 15, 20 minutes. It's built up over time. That 10 weeks of the term, they were really right engaged into their novels towards, the later part of the term. And
I think
really
the two things that have, if I just speak from SLC, our senior part where Ra and I are, is the two things that we really worked on was building up their stamina. So we noticed that, we had to start at 5 minutes. We couldn't just go in and say, right, read for 20 minutes. So we spent a long time on building up their stamina. And the other thing that we've spent a lot of time on is just right books. So we have to make sure that they've got just right books, because that's why they were so disengaged. They were choosing books that they weren't interested in, or too hard or too easy, or, not extending their vocab. So
that library.
Yeah, and bringing in the classroom lovelies has obviously really helped with that just right text choice as well for them.
Yeah, and they know they can go back to it, that they're going to read that book again tomorrow. We allow our students 20 minutes of independent reading, so 4 times a week, that's 80 minutes by the end of the week that they weren't previously doing, and that's definitely helped.
Yeah. So the intentional time that has been given 4 times a week has made a difference, not just to stamina, but to
vocabulary, connections to their reading and writing workshops, conversations.
Enjoyment.
Yeah.
Knowledge of books and authors, even.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't
How to use a
really-
library.
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, it's really increased all around. They see themselves as readers now.
Yeah, yeah. And I can definitely, just coming into rooms, it's different things I'm hearing them talking about and engaging in new ways. So all of those things are just so visible, when you go into your rooms. Just a quick mention of your classroom libraries, because they also are something that needed to grow this year.
Or establish.
Yeah. Fair call. Fair call. How's the school gone about that?
Big budget.
Yeah, so we did leave it a lot. That one was probably more up to the individual teacher, because obviously they had to factor in their age group that they were teaching and the text that they would need. Lots of teachers have used their own time and resources to stock up their libraries, I will be honest, but we also were lucky to be able to have some budgets to resource that. We have used a lot of secondhand bookstores just to get books in onto the shelves, and you can pick them up for $1, $2, and really, if a kid takes it home and forgets to bring it back, is it the end of the world that you haven't got that book back? Like, it costs us $1 and it's another book that they've got at home. So we went in that with that mindset as well, that we knew that was happening. The other big thing that we did, and as the facilitator, when working with Sharon, we spoke to the teachers about getting the students to help set up the libraries. So they knew how they were catalogued, if they wanted it by colour of the cover, or if they wanted it by genre, or they by author. It was all directed by them, so then it became a bit more purposeful for them as well.
Yeah, and more ownership and more familiarity with what was in their library.
Yeah, that's right. And they do get excited when we put new books in. They notice that now. But I think, there was a real everybody wanted a classroom library. You showed us some amazing models of that too, Sharon, right at the beginning of the year, that this is what it could be. And everybody got quite excited about that, I think, as a potential area in their classrooms that we didn't have before.
I really like the point that you've made about it being a growing thing over the year. It isn't about just having this whole library set up. In fact, if it grows,
back to that noticing.
Yeah.
If they're not into those, you can't set everything up, because otherwise you're not noticing what they're reading, and that's what you've got to build your library around.
That's it. And for every time I've heard, children, or you've said, students are into this or into that, and then that's what you are chasing up and what you'll find. Warrior cats, it's like you mentioned
I've
that.
learned
I'm
a
going,
lot about warrior cats.
oh my goodness, I have got a bundle of those sitting at home that have, gone through our children. And, it's wonderful to see those warrior cats on the shelf in your room just being used. And everybody's talking about
That's down
them.
the shelf very long, those ones.
No.
I think that's the other thing that you said about the second-hand books too, because we've actively promoted with our kids, look what I got from Kiwanis or wherever.
Yes.
Our kids are going to those second-hand bookstores now because they know they can get a book for $1.
Yeah.
They're seeing that as an option.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Being proactive in wanting to have book ownership. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think there's been a better time in history, actually, to look for secondhand books. Absolutely. It just seems like there is a flood of books making their way out of homes into bookshops. And a lot of the secondhand bookshops are organising them in such incredible ways, as if it is a bookshop.
Yes, absolutely.
So, yeah.
And they're not just shoved in the back corner like you probably saw 5 years ago. They're a main feature in a lot of these stores as well now. So.
Yeah, yeah. So that has been another big part of this year, is people building. But I think that's a really wonderful point to draw out, is that teachers have actually taken that on themselves. And I think you've had a little bit of classroom budget for books, and that's an important thing, isn't it, that they're consumables. It doesn't have to go through the library system and take however many weeks to go through. They go straight into classrooms. If those books don't come back for whatever reason, we are thinking happy that they are there at home with somebody, and that it can grow over time. And I know there's classroom libraries where, teachers' own money is being spent on those. But I think it's also, as teachers, we kind of like the thought too of knowing if we're not with this, or if we're not in this school even, I've got books that I can actually take with me, to start growing a classroom library too. What about, you've talked, Kate, about the importance of mentor texts for teachers, the professional texts. Are there any particularly good tools or resources that you think we haven't mentioned that would be good to talk about? Classroom libraries, of course, are a big tool. What about anchor charts?
Probably been a bit of a work in progress still with our site. Yeah. We are trying to move away from PowerPoint's whiteboards. We're trying to anchor everything down into our own teacher writing and reading journals.
For what reason?
At the moment, I'd probably say most of it is there to reference back to. That's probably the main focus for the teachers at the moment, in the fact that if we have been working on a specific thing in writing, we can then turn back a page. Oh, remember when we did this, and then it automatically links back in. So, and I guess it's that modelling as well to students that we have our own journals that we keep our work in, just like you do as students. So, probably a little bit along that.
Yeah, well, we've definitely used our writing and reading modelling books with students, and as Kate said, reference back to them. At the moment, we're writing information reports, and we've gone back to, remember we talked about this sort of paragraphing, and remember we talked about these ideas, and getting the students to actually use our teacher modelling books. Yes, they're for us, but kids can go back and refer to any pages, and if they want that, our students have one-to-one iPads, so they can take a photo of that page, so they've got that reference for themselves. I don't think we necessarily take the pages out of our modelling books and put them up in our rooms anywhere, because we're too precious about our own modelling books. But that's something for us to keep working on.
I think it's the sharing as well. Like, I know Ra says it so many times that this idea in the book isn't my idea. I didn't come up with it. This is for us all to build our ideas from. So it becomes a sharing tool for everyone as well.
Yeah. And I think the important thing about any tool is that it works. Yeah. If it's not, if like Robert, you just said you take sheets out of your book and put up.
Yeah, I get the kids to help me create the sheet, the ankle chart. So they're playing a part in it as well, and then it goes up on the literacy wall so they can see it on a daily basis. If they need to refer back to it, it's there.
Yes, yeah.
I think a change you helped us make, though, Sharon, was when we get kids' contributions now, we actually write their names under who said something, so that there's even more value for the students. Oh, that's right. Remember, so-and-so said that, and, that was a really good, but I want to use that, and who. It's a better reference for them. We weren't really acknowledging that as much, I don't think, but we definitely are now.
Yeah. It's a nice way for them to feel, well, all ideas are valued then. I suppose it almost goes back to what you said, Robert, too, about when we grouped students and students construct themselves as, well, I'm either good or I'm not good or I'm in the middle. Does that make me good or only half good or whatever it is?
Everyone contributing. You've got those children who their strengths may not be in reading and writing, but their oral language is strong, and they're sharing during those oral language moments, or they're sharing their part of what they interpreted from the story. It's really valuable, and it's great for the class's motivation as well, because they can say, well, so-and-so is doing something. Oh, I've got this to share, and they get more involved in the lesson because everyone's buying into it.
Yeah, and being active in their thinking at that time. I remember being in your room a few weeks ago, and a child, I can't remember what it was that they said, but I remember you just going, just acknowledging what a wonderful thought that was that the child had come up with. And, you said to me later, well, that just blew me. That's not what I was expecting from that child. And so to catch those moments and for a child to feel comfortable in saying, I'm sharing this with everybody,
right.
is a real, that's the real community of learners then, isn't it?
It raises the self-esteem of the child too, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. All right, let's finish up with, what are your absolute favourite aspects of this year? So you're a year into a new way of being. And, I mean, it was a big jolt at the beginning of it. Yeah. It was a lot but, oh, my goodness, everybody has just risen, to that. So, yes, Ra, I'd love you to start.
I've got a couple, and one of them is the fact that all the kids are reading now. That we've created a classroom where we have readers and we discuss books and we can recommend books to others based on what we're reading or what they're reading. And my other one is using the when we model our writing, that saying to the students, this is I'm thinking as I want you thinking. I haven't pre-written this. This is not something that I've, sat last night and written this up and I'm going to show you my perfect example. I'm going to model what I want you thinking as I'm doing it, and Kate and I will both stop and go, I'm not sure what to write next, and modelling that thinking and then getting them to jump in, I think's really allowed some of them to go, right, it's okay if I struggle too, but I've got a point. The teacher's given me a starting point, so I've got somewhere to start from, because we did have a lot of writers particularly who would sit there and go, I don't know what to write. Well, that's no longer an option, because the teacher's already modelled something to me and I can start with that if I need to.
Yeah.
I think that's been a big shift for me.
And I love that. I love how you call your books your teacher modelling book, and that's what you're talking about right there, that modelling and modelling the thinking. Nothing more powerful than that, is it? That all of those, that even when you are in the process of a struggle in your own thinking, how you push through that. And that's wonderful to model to students, how you overcome, how you push through, how you keep going, and that they've got the capacity to do that too. They're very capable of that. So, nice. Robert, what's been your... Yeah. Kate, no one else can see that. Kate's eyeing Robert going, you next.
Well, for me, I suppose it's a shift in the children's attitude towards poetry. There was a real reluctancy to read any poetry, to be involved in it in any way. And, we've got children now who are starting to write poetry at home. They're collecting their own poems and they're sharing poetry books with me at school. And for me, that's just been a huge shift in the attitude of the children. And I think a couple of weeks ago, we read the Jabberwocky to the children, and just to see their engagement in that particular poem and to break it down and understand that the language of it is so rich, and the images that you get from that poem, and the children just absolutely loved it. So that was just a real highlight for me this year.
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay. Mine's probably a little bit from the literacy facilitator perspective. I think I've really enjoyed that. It wasn't necessarily a reluctancy from the teachers at the start of the year, but there was that little bit of reservation, like, you know what people are like, they don't like change, and they, so I think for me, just seeing their growth in the way that they're changing their thinking, the way that they're developing their lessons, the way that they're planning as teams, the way that they're developing their own literacy capacity, I think has just come in absolute leaps and bounds over the year. And whether that's, obviously having Sharon to support me in that role has been phenomenal, and her knowledge to pass on, but then also to work with the staff and have those side-by-sides, I think has been a really big shift forward. So and getting that immediate feedback in change and changing their attitude, which obviously positively reflects on the students. So I think for me it's probably the step back and overseeing all of it and seeing the change in the teachers has been really, really great.
Yeah.
Can I add on to that though, Kate? The thing you've also done really well is still made us accountable though. You know, we have staff meetings where Kate leads us into some quite deep thinking about our own practice, and going through the teacher reference books in a staff meeting, you know, using them so they're not just sitting on the shelf as something we don't ever actually use. She encourages us to use them. She, gets us to really engage with this new program, and having that opportunity at a staff meeting and having that driven for us has, I think, helped guide us as well.
Yeah.
I think the 3 books that you've introduced into the school, the consortium and Jennifer
The literacy continuum
the literacy continuum
and Jennifer Saravallo's
books,
writing strategies, the reading strategy book and the writing strategy book.
They're excellent resources that all teachers should have. I think it's just all there for you to help you, with each lesson, of course, if need be. If you've got something to go to, if there is something lacking in the class, there's some brilliant sort of mini lessons in those books to help you.
Yeah. Yes, and Jennifer Saravallo's books are very mentor text and mini lesson driven and have some very practical 1 page.
Yeah.
Yep.
1 page. So we're busy. We're busy, but to plan to know right there, okay, how can I work with that mentor text? And the prompts, some of the prompts that she lists, great for roving too, aren't they? Where it lets us think, what am I looking for? How can I engage with a student and ask this question or find out more about how they're using that? And sometimes the questions are, back to the child. It's about getting the students being able to articulate their own learning and understanding. That's come through heavily today about what you're talking about. It's not just that students are doing, you're not seeing, better test results, but it's their engagement, their pride, their understanding, their articulation, the thinking that they're making visible. Really, it's so energising to go into any of these classes. Really energising. Actually, just whilst I know I'm sort of cycling back, but we talked a little bit about, we did have a few models of working this year. Ra, you talked a little bit about, we started with some like personalised learning, some one-on-one.
Kate introduced our units of work, and then we've been working on those and making them our own. And then we all got some time to talk with Sharon. We were given some release time to meet with Sharon for a whole lesson to talk about anything we felt we were struggling with personally. And then Sharon and Kate came around and observed us. So as Robert said, very non-threatening. They came in just to say, right, where are you at? It wasn't you should be at this point in this journey. It's where are you at and where do you want to go next? Because that's what we'll help you with. So we called them side-by-sides, coaching, and they were fantastic for us just to really hone in. These are the things I think are going well. These are the things what do I do next, Kate or Sharon? And then Kate's been able to address a lot of those in our staff meetings as well, any of the common ones throughout the staff. Yeah. And then those people who needed a bit more individual would say to Kate, can I get an extra bit with Sharon, an extra bit of time one-on-one with you, Sharon? And I think just that opportunity has really helped everybody, including our SSOs. We were really lucky that Sharon was able to meet with the SSOs. We have a lot of SSOs in our school supporting our learners, and for them to be on the same page as the classroom teachers in these programs has been key as well.
Yeah.
Is that what you meant?
Yes. Yeah. And I like that, just like how classroom libraries have unfolded and the use, the buying of mentor texts has unfolded. I feel like that's how, Kate, you in the role as literacy facilitator and working closely with Cassie, it's really wonderful when we can meet together, that all of these things, whichever ways we're working with teachers, have always been responsive, again, to noticings and how to make it work so people feel that they can engage comfortably. And I think the way that it's been constructed has really honoured teachers' professionalism and the journey of learning that we all need to continue. We're in the business of learning, and so our own learning is so important. And it's just been so engaging. I want to say, from my point of view too, the learning together that we've been doing has been just as rich for me.
We get to practice our practice, but we get to do it in a way when we're ready, but also sometimes with a little push, because sometimes you can sit and be comfortable and sometimes you need to be pushed out of that as well. And I definitely think that Holy Trinity of Cassie, Kate and you, Sharon, has supported us all in doing that. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. But we know we've got a strong team leading us, so there's a lot of trust in that process. But, I think we've the opportunity, as I say, to practice our practice.
Yeah.
To better ourselves as teachers.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I suppose where I was trying to get back to was, what were we calling this? Teachers sharing their professional practices was the name of today's podcast. And I thought, I've got to get back to, have we really talked about sharing professional practices? It's really been the opportunity to use a number of, I suppose, in want of a better term, like coaching models to support professional practices. And that's been pretty exciting to do that planning along the way. And I think at any point, Kate, if it wasn't working, we would have absolutely responded to that. But I think that's been the power of leadership, literacy facilitator role on the ground all the time, noticing, knowing what next, what's right, and to be able to really build on that, and everybody being a really strong part of that process. I know in staff meetings you would get that opportunity to talk about what's working, what's not. So those sorts of things can really, I think, build good cultures of professional practice learning in schools.
Kate's been really key too, and I know you won't say this for yourself, so I'll say it for you, is that when we have a staff meeting, she will say, I tried this.
Yes.
And that has allowed people to also try things.
Yeah.
And because she is our facilitator, but she is teaching 4 days a week as well.
Yes.
She's trying stuff out and then sharing that with us. And she doesn't always share the successes as well. You've shared some, you said, I tried this, didn't go as well as I thought for whatever reason. And that's allowed people to, that level of safety, I guess.
Yeah. And to drive the whole notion of being self-reflective, because as learners, that's
the key.
That is the key, isn't it? And when we can reflect safely on our learning, but it is key. I did want to mention that before, that your facilitator role is 1 day a week. It's not a full-time. Neither of your roles are full-time roles, but the power of a facilitator or coach being in classrooms and trying and being able to share that is such such a pivotal point for the people that we work with. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because we're not saying, oh, well, you don't know, you're not in the classroom anymore.
Yeah. Yes.
She is in the classroom.
Yeah.
And when she says she's tried it, she has tried it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to say?
I don't know. For me, I think, you go through your time of teaching. For me, it's been a few years now, and you come across some key things that stand out. I think this literacy program really stands out for me as something which is gold. It's something which has really changed me as a teacher, and how my literacy teaching practice is done now. I think the benefits are there. It's evident. And these guys to my right here have done tremendous work getting it in place. But it is an excellent way to teach through this literacy program that you guys are putting out to the schools. So.
Yes, actually, the term program we might not use, but we might say framework.
Yep.
Because it isn't a
pick up and use program.
Yeah.
No. What we're talking about is a professional honouring the professional decision making based on what you're noticing about your students, what you want to bring through those texts. And that doesn't mean on framework, approach, because it is very much around a workshop model.
Yep.
And that gradual release of responsibility and that time for students to engage in the use of strategies independently. And if that was something that we said, what might be an identifying factor between, and I know you've already mentioned it, Kate, but what last year might have looked like to now, it's the amount of time where students get to choose and use and practice those things for themselves and be able to reflect on that for themselves and share with others what they've achieved, so that all of that thinking becomes part of what we're hearing students talk about in classrooms, as well as seeing them doing it. Let's thank Kate and Ra and Robert for absolute generosity in sharing their thinking and insights and the journey of this year through processes of change and really developing professional practices. So thank you to everyone for joining us today. We've loved to see that so many of you have subscribed to our episodes from all corners of the world. The Teachers Toolkit podcast is all about giving you an insider's guide to top teaching ideas, tools, techniques in literacy teaching and learning. And we love it all the more when we get teachers sharing those tips, tricks, techniques and insider's guide to that as well. Please subscribe to our weekly newsletter via the website. You will receive advance notice on blogs, podcasts, events and ways to connect to us. Thank you so much to our three here today, and all the best to you and all the best to our listeners. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.